Well, good afternoon. I'd like to thank Press Corps for joining us. I'd also like to note that you were not there at 4 a.m. at the Wickland Farm on Saturday morning for the turkey opener, but that's okay. Thank you, everyone who's here. I'm going to give a special thank you to Rick King and the Independent Expert Review of MNLARS. We're here today because one of the first actions that I took, Executive Order 1902, was to establish an executive order on a Blue Ribbon Commission on technology and technology purchases and upgrades. And we knew that the situation with MNLAR and somewhat by extension the MNSure system, that tech purchases, tech upgrades, migration from legacy systems to new systems was a challenging endeavor for anyone, and that quite honestly we were not producing the results that we needed to get. In the first week, I gathered the legislative leaders who are here together to start and to talk about what was the course forward on that. And that started with making sure that we had a robust review of where we stood and then trying to develop some courses of action. That happened in the time where we were able to put a release of MNLARS 1.15 out, but part of that agreement on March 5th, the first piece of legislation that I signed in as governor included having an independent review of experts take the deep dive and make recommendations on where we should go forward, specifically with MNLARS. It was chaired by the chair of the Blue Ribbon Commission and put a panel of experts together. At this time, I would like to turn it over, and you're going to get copies and links to it, the report that was put out for release today that was required by law. Mr. Rick King, our chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Governor. Good afternoon. As the governor said, my name is Rick King. By day, I'm the executive vice president of operations at Thomson Reuters in Eagan, and in my spare time serve the state in several ways. One of those is chairing the Blue Ribbon Council on IT. As such, I was asked to head up the independent expert review of MNLARS based on the law passed on March 5th that provided, among other things, emergency funding to MNLARS, the MNLARS program. Two other members of the review team are Mick Atten and Amy Albus. They're both here today, and a third one is Teresa Wise, and she couldn't be with us this afternoon. Starting on March 5th, the review team ran an intensive process with over 50 meetings with various stakeholders. We talked to 19 deputy registrars, visited 2 offices in person to listen, to not just listen, but to watch the counter transactions in the office with our citizens. We also spoke with the Auto Dealers Association, the Insurance Association, the Auto Salvage Group, and more. We met with internal teams at Minute, at DPS, at DVS, and the Office of the Legislative Auditor. Our process included talking to one of the vendors who responded to the state-issued RFI to hear about the maturity of packaged software solutions. We also spoke to 4 states that use that particular vendor's packaged software solution to help us gauge the maturity of the solution and the market. Given all of this, our recommendation is to move to a packaged software solution. Paired with that recommendation are 2 important recommendations. First, to continue MNLARS until version 1.16 is released in June, and then freeze it. That puts MNLARS into a maintenance mode where the only work done on it is for bug fixes. This will require a freeze on the implementation of or development required by any changes as well. Second, to figure out a way to expedite the procurement and implementation of a packaged software solution to minimize the time until the selected package is live. The review team believes our recommendations are the best go-forward plan for the state and provide the most future-proofing possible. While much good has been done since the failed MNLARS release of September 2017, the path going forward for an internal build of the remaining software is risky. We believe it will be much less risky to select a packaged software solution, particularly one that is currently in use in at least 12 other states. The subject matter experts at such a vendor are knowledgeable about how other states register their vehicles and they have expertise that would be brought to bear in the selected package solution. The review team believes that with rapid procurement and selection, a vendor could have a system running and replace the current MNLARS software in 16 months. It would then take approximately 10 more months to replace the remaining legacy software that is still operating alongside of MNLARS today. We have a couple of additional recommendations to highlight before I turn the podium back. Number one, we expect this transition to package software to cost more in this upcoming biennium, but to better position the state for the future. Second, DPS and DVS must be the owner of this application. Minute must play a strong role in assisting DPS to make this successful. Third, the recommendation will force yet another change on the deputy registrars and the employees of DVS working to support them. While the review team is sensitive to this challenge, strongly believes we will be in a much better position later when the whole thing is done. In closing, the review team believes this report details the best approach going forward. We stand by to support the state in whatever way we can. We will be here for Q&A following everyone's remarks, and I'll pass the baton at this time back to the governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. When we came in, as I said, the first week, we gathered this team together. As governor, it's my responsibility to provide the best quality of service to the taxpayers of Minnesota, provide the transparency and the accountability to make sure they feel like they're getting the best value for their dollars. To do that, I felt that it was necessary to have what appears to be and what we believe is the first real independent review of this situation since 2007 when it was implemented, and certainly the help of the legislative auditor's reports, and I would say by the advocacy of the senators who were here and the experts in transportation who asked us to take a look. My job was to provide courses of action and determine what was in the best interest of the taxpayers, both from a service outcome for them, as well as a cost analysis, and then to look over the horizon, what makes us more robust, able to adapt, and going forward. With that being said, it is this administration's position that I believe we accept these recommendations. We move to a package software solution. We implement the recommendations, and they are, and you're going to get a chance to see this. I'm going to thank Rick again and again, because I think there is an incredible outline here for enterprise-wise changes. What I think you can rest assured of is we will not tackle one of these software upgrades again and one of these technology upgrades without looking through the vast amount and the recommendations, and you'll get a chance to see. Just so you know, this is a recommendation that came out of this expertise or this expert panel. Recommendation 11 says, where appropriate, Minute should seek to leverage package software solutions. I agree with that. I think that's exactly the way we should look at it. Recommendation 12 says, evaluate and simplify business processes, rules, and regulations before replacing large comprehensive applications to see if we can make it easier to fit rather than leaving wide open-ended, no parameters where you can't construct a piece of software to be able to do that by setting those parameters early. There are legion of these suggestions in there that is the first real work product of the Blue Ribbon Commission. I think it got us to a point where today I'm asking, and the legislators will speak as they've got a chance to see this, a way to change how we go about our technology, to go about how we come together to find real working solutions, how we have true accountability for the taxpayers, and we start to find those solutions. So I am grateful for Rick and his team. I'm grateful for the legislators here who since the first day in office have been working to that, and I want to turn this over to someone who's partnered with us to make sure this happens, Senator Gazelka. Thank you.
Yep. I was almost saying good morning because we were up at 3:30 and you guys weren't there either. So, but really I wanted to just be here to compliment the governor. The governor really led on this issue. MNLARS was dropped in his lap, and we had been frustrated with it for a number of years. The governor was willing to take a new and fresh look at it, allow somebody independently to look both for the governor's standpoint, but also the House and Senate, and say maybe we should do something different. So this is bold. And as a result of this shift, I know that the Senate will be leaning into this as we find the solution, and it bodes well it bodes well for Minnesota. We got a lot of other things we have to tackle, but this was a big one that is being tackled because we looked at it objectively, brought other eyes to look on it, and here we are standing together. So with that, Governor, I'm not sure who's next, but thank you.
Senator Newman, over there, been a partner from the beginning, and I think we talked about this. One of the first things that's important is all legislating is about relationships and building trust, and I was grateful for Senator Newman gave me the benefit of the doubt on the early parts of our fix on MNLARS, but it was with an understanding that he expected to be heard, and one of his suggestions led directly to this independent review. So, Senator Newman. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. First, I want to reiterate what Senator Gazelka mentioned and thank Governor Walz for being willing to take a fresh new look at this. The MNLARS situation has been a real frustration for me for a very long time, but with the help of Rick King and his crew, this is really an optimistic day. And I can tell you that at least insofar as I am concerned, I am going to follow the recommendation of Rick King and his crew. I look forward to working with my counterpart in the Senate, Senator Dibble, with whom I will work collaboratively. I also am very much looking forward to my newfound friend, Representative Hornstein, in the House. And we are already talking about where to go from here, and I will tell you that as of tomorrow morning, the first thing I'm going to do is pick this up and start working on it. So I would look at this, folks, as being really a good day, something to look forward to, and for the first time in a very long time, I honestly feel that we see the end of the tunnel. And we are going to get there, and we are going to do what is best for the people of the state of Minnesota. And with Rick King and his crew, I think that is going to be accomplished. Thank you very much.
Frank? Okay. Yep. Thank you, Senator. Good stuff.
Good afternoon. I'm Frank Hornstein. I chair the House Transportation, Finance, and Policy Division. And I want to also thank the governor and Mr. King and his team. I really feel today we've turned a corner, both technologically and politically. We're all on the same page. I also accept the recommendations of this report, and together we can develop legislation if needed to move this process forward, and I think in a collaborative way, both with the administration and on a bipartisan basis in the legislature. So, like Senator Newman, I'm very optimistic. This is a new day in terms of our approach to MNLARS, and we'll be doing good things for the people of Minnesota. Thank you so much for being here.
I'd like to mention before we take questions, we also have the folks that will actually make this happen. Commissioner Harrington, Commissioner Tomes are here. They've had the opportunity, and some of the technical questions may be directed to them, the opportunity over the last few hours to dive into this, but it is a well-researched, and again, as I dig into it more and start looking at this, I think it's a real blueprint for how we go forward to do what we know should have been done, not get to the point where we were at, where we had to do this, that this discussion was on the front end, and we make those best informed decisions. And so I'm really grateful for that, and I also recognize that these commissioners will be putting into place. So questions of any of us, please go.
Governor, maybe Rick King can answer this question.
Sure.
Best. You talk about short-term disruptions. What does that mean for the registrars and for the people like any of us trying to get license tabs?
Well, I think you'll be able to get license tabs just the way you get the license tabs today. So that's not going to be a disruption. For the registrars and the people in the back office functioning, this is yet another change. I mean, they've gone through a change from the old system to MNLARS. A lot of this worked on their backs when the software didn't quite do what it was supposed to do. They'd perform miracles out there in the field with the real customer standing in front of them waiting, and I think they did a commendable job with that. The part about changing again, they're a little fatigued with the change. You can't really blame them, but I think they'll be excited with a package solution. I think on the driver's side, they're using a package solution today, so this isn't going to be much of a change as we think about it, but it is a change, and that was my point.
What the price tag of this, going to this new package? What's the ballpark figure?
I think you've got some figures in the package that we have on the website, but it's going to cost in the biennium about $20 million more than what is in the current governor's submission.
And that's about 61 million that was in your original budget?
I think the number, if I remember right, was 53, and it's maybe 73.
So what's the total cost though now, from beginning to end of this MNLARS? If you're going to add the 73 to what?
I'll go ahead on that. And those are numbers probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 173 million. And I think any of us here, when we hear this, that it is completely unacceptable. I think one of the things, Rick, and you might be better at articulating this, but it's one of the reasons why going forward, this idea of now having the support of 12 states, the ability to be able to build forward, there was always going to be an ongoing cost to any software program, any updates that we had to do. It was the original build out. I think most of us, and there's folks here that recognize, at this point in time, this is certainly the right solution. I'm encouraged to hear that we all agree that it needs to go there. These systems, these packaged software systems have gotten even more robust out. So yeah, this is a very expensive build. I think there's an acknowledgement, as I think Rick described it, as the premature and failed rollout in September of 2017. But the one thing I think should be noted, and I appreciate Rick doing that, and it's in pretty great detail in this report, that there's benefits to a lot of that build out, a lot of that data migration over to MNLARS. It's going to save us time. It's not as if all of the first amount of money was wasted on this. It simply wasn't targeted as well as it could have been. And again, the reason for going with this is the ongoing upkeep, maintenance on MNLARS alone rather than a packaged software solution will get far more expensive. So Rick, I don't want to take your words, but I think what you're saying is we're going to put a little more on the front end, but over the long-term length of this, there's the cost savings should be better.
Governor, you will increase your ask of the legislature immediately, is that right?
I'd just like to say that's what we're working on right now, and I don't want to put the legislators, they have been patient, they have been tolerant with this. I think there's a spirit of collaboration. I'm working with my commissioners right now to take a look at this, but I think that expectation that there will have to be some of that spending, but again, much like we did the deficiency spending, we did this right by having clear parameters of expectations of what would happen with that. I think the same thing would be done here, but I think we're early in the stages of this. We're getting the collaboration around this. There's a legislative process to go forward. This is as Senator Newman said, as all of them here would say, I understand this is a pretty drastic course of action, but as I said, we said it when we hired Commissioner Tomes, that if we're going to fail fast and fix it, save money for the taxpayers and get this thing on the right path. We have been dying a slow death for 12 years here, certainly over the last 2 years, and it doesn't make sense.
Senator Newman, could we follow up with Senator Newman on that? Are you prepared to come up with more money? It was painful for you already. Can you find another 20 million?
I'm going to duck the question to this extent. Until today, I really had no idea as to what the cost of this was going to be. I now have a fair idea, but please give us a chance so that Senator Dibble and Representative Hornstein and myself can get together and start talking about this together with the Speaker and the Majority Leader. And all I can say is we are going to do the best that we can to come up with the necessary funding and the necessary legislation to move forward. And the idea has always been that we were going to get this report by May 1st, and that's not an arbitrary date. We wanted to get it by May 1st so that we can get this done before the end of the session. And I think that's of paramount importance.
You mentioned that there are about a dozen states, I think, that have done this already. Does that mean with a single vendor? And does that mean then that you've already identified a vendor, or is this going to go to bids?
The exact form of procurement, I don't think has been determined, but in the recommendation, we asked for a very rapid procurement. So that would be the direction that we've suggested. The one vendor that we picked to deep dive with was one of the three that responded to the state's RFI. So we dug deep to make sure we could understand their capabilities, the costs, the timelines, what they did with other states. We were able to do that. We were not pre-selecting that vendor. We were just simply using them as a model to be compared to what it would take to build out MNLARS. So we have a much better idea as a result of using them.
Which RFI are you saying that they, one of three?
There was an RFI issued by DVS, I believe, for package software providers that could do the vehicle information. I think the time frame was,
That was Senator Newman's proposal for us that we followed.
In an earlier piece of legislation involving MNLARS, what we did is we put in a mandatory RFI, and the department did respond to that. There were 3 responses to that RFI, and I believe that that is, one of the RFIs is what Mr. King is referring to.
Mr. King, question for you about, actually a comment that the governor made, that some of what was done in the MNLARS development transfers over, so it's not all wasted money. I think I'm paraphrasing the governor correctly. My question is, did you run an analysis on how much the state would have spent total? 173 million is what we're going to pay now potentially. But if we had not gone the MNLARS route and had gone to the package software just initially, what would that have cost? Do you have any feel for that?
it's hard to speculate around what those things are. I think if at some point at the very beginning, if there was a package available, you could look at the cost for the package software and say that's how much it should cost if you started that way from the beginning. Some of these package softwares at that time, though, when the state first launched with HP, were not available. They were not in the 12 states that they're in now. That market is rapidly developing with the vendors doing more and more with other states. So if you said how much is that going to cost in total from September of 2017 when the launch happened, you'd have to take the number that people said then and add to it what we've said will take package software. So depending on where you start and where you finish, you can come up with different numbers. What we're saying is it's worth doing the package software today, and that some of what was done in order to prepare for MNLARS, you had to move data over, you had to cleanse the data, you had to make the data right. That data has been cleaned up already. That is one example of some of the work that was done with MNLARS that will help us with the package software going forward.
Just a couple quick follow-ups. So in your judgment, the gross cost, as it were, is less pulling the plug on MNLARS and going to a package software, correct, for the taxpayers?
Now keep in mind that the cost to the taxpayer goes on beyond the implementation of the package software. You have to pay maintenance, you get updates, you get new technology coming to you from that vendor. There's an ongoing stream of costs, so it will go on. But fundamentally, once we get through the bubble time when we're running both systems, implementing one and running on the old system, that's going to be a bubble cost. That's more than the average. What's going to happen is once you implement and you start streaming off the MNLARS support, shutting down those systems, you will get to an operating rate that is at least equal, if not below, the operating rate of the MNLARS system today.
Going ahead with MNLARS as it's currently constituted, what would have happened in the long run if you stayed with that instead of pivoting to this new path?
There's a lot of detail in the report. The one thing I would say is when we called out the word risk, that was an important word, because what we saw were there's some things in the future that have yet to be spec'd out in detail that we are making, as MNLARS team was making estimates about what it would take to complete those. And we believe that there was a lot of risk in those, not knowing fully how much effort that would take. Not only that, but bringing on more contractors to work on that, which is the way this works. You hire them from companies that provide contractors, and none of those contractors really have the expertise in building a vehicle licensing system. So you're having to train them in this domain, and you have that risk going on further that I would think, and we felt, there was more risk of that number getting higher at the end with MNLARS than there is with a package software solution.
It wasn't salvageable. The MNLARS as it is now, you didn't view it as something that could be salvaged.
Salvageable is an odd word because I think it works today. It works for most transactions. It's not functional for many of the more complicated transactions, and it does not provide a future platform on which you can easily introduce new technologies, things like self-service, or do cheaply things like adding plate types to the project without adding huge development costs. So a more modern approach will actually be, we think, better.
Adobe Creative Cloud, which is a subscription service, and it updates itself periodically. And given that, and since this market may have not been mature a few years ago, it existed, shouldn't they have gone with off-the-shelf software in the beginning?
There were, in my opinion, and that of our team, there really wasn't a packaged software solution provider back in those days. More of the people started with a really small core and then customized for you. And that's what HP did for several states that didn't really work in those states. That's why 3M tried it in 3 states and actually got out of that market. That's a problematic thing for a software provider, to be customized software. Today, you're quite right. Today, we have packaged software. You have, just like other software products, you have an annual update, you have quarterly bug fixes, you get enhancements, because any of these package providers are competing with other package providers in the market. So there's kind of a race to be the most complete package in the market, and that benefits the end user and the consumer.
What about data privacy? This data will potentially be available through, so a third party is going to get involved now. How safe is Minnesotans' data?
I think, the data in the state of Minnesota, protection of it, is one of those topics that we are digging deep in the Blue Ribbon Council. So I'll have more to say to that. There is nothing inherent in this third-party selection that changes the privacy and protection of the data for the citizens. In actuality, you had a bunch of people from contract agencies outside of the state doing the work for MNLARS anyway. I'm not saying that they were risky at all, but you have people that are not state employees handling the development either way. So I don't see any difference in the risk.
How are Minnesota drivers going to be affected by this directly? The millions of people who are going into their registrars and getting their license tabs, getting new driver's licenses during this bubble time, as you call it?
I think during the bubble time, MNLARS will be functional. It'll be what they're going to use to do the transactions. The backlogs will get cleaned up. We'll just freeze it at version 1.16, which comes out in June. So from that point through the 16-month period that we've suggested is possible with accelerated procurement, we will have to function on that release. That does the normal transactions that it does today successfully. What it doesn't do are some of the real specialty ones, and those are the ones today that the deputy registrars are having to make telephone calls to internal people in DVS to try to get them cleared, and that is being worked on pretty aggressively. So there's also a call in the recommendations to make sure there's enough staff for DVS to respond to the needs of the deputy registrars who are out there with the citizens, and make sure not only can we handle those special cases, but we can clean up the backlog of any issues that are out there.
So most drivers won't notice any difference? That's what you're telling us?
That would be the goal until you switched over. Once you switch over to the new package, let's say in that period of time, there may be some different interactions when the consumers work with the product. Today, you can renew tabs in many cases for motor vehicles through a website. And actually, you're interacting with a legacy system that is not even MNLARS. And that legacy system also needs to be dealt with, and the process is transferred into this third-party package solution, so that that system can be shut down as well. And that would be part of the future development of MNLARS too. So until that self-service presents itself, there's not really a change for the consumer. The deputy registrars, however, will begin to see the user interface and testing, along with some of the expert users at DVS and the experts at Minute, looking at the package as the vendor begins the implementation. So there will be some possible tests that are going on with groups of them.
Before the next question, if I could just segue on this, because it's a good point on this. Senator Jasinski has been an incredible voice and an advocate for those end users who, quite honestly, were left out of the development process, those deputy registers who were there, and I'd just like to give him just a minute to address this, because this is the part that I think, as we change processes, as we think about technology, some of the most basic things we need to think about are now being implemented is, before we go to one of these, and this is what I know our team here understands, is let's make sure the people who are being most impacted by that, the deputy registers and the consumers, are there at the table in the development stage. So I'd like to give him a minute just to mention that.
Thank you, Governor. I wasn't expecting to speak, but I want to thank you for letting me speak and give some clout to Governor Walz. He has really took hold of this problem and is addressing it very, very actively. We have not seen this before, so it's good to have that. My big concerns are deputy registers who've been harmed or hurt out there, that we get relief out to them. They are the small businesses across the state of Minnesota that deal with this day in, day out, that we need to get some relief to. So the Senate passed the bill. I've been relatively frustrated. I've voiced that to the governor, that we need to get some relief out to these deputy registers as soon as possible. These, again, are the small businesses across our state that are dealing with us, getting our license tabs to us and our driver's licenses out every single day of the week. So, thank you.
Governor,
please, yes.
There was a comment earlier that we've turned a corner politically. What's changed? Do you agree with that?
I do.
What's changed?
It's hard for me, you know, and not having been here previously to this, but I think, of course, not being naive or coy, that you get into kind of logheads on this issue, on many issues, but this one is different, and I think it sets the tone that I want to really extend this idea that the trust that was put out, this thing is frustrating to all Minnesotans. It's frustrating to elected officials who are hearing about it. It's frustrating to elected officials who were saying, maybe we should approach this a little differently, and they felt like they weren't being heard and that we should approach it differently. We came about this, and it's the way we're going to look at all technology purposes, and I think what they're saying is the way we're going to look at all problems. Where can we find some solutions moving forward? Where can we hear a voice in this? Where can people really feel they're being valued when they tell us, you need to look differently at how this system's working? And when they start to see there's actual results of that, and we let an independent commission and the data and the science lead us to where we were going to go, and we have experts that all of us trust because they have a long history of delivering, I think that's what's changed. And I think I would echo those sentiments. I think trust was extended to both sides. I think solutions, and this is really good stuff. This is what, again, I think it's a fair question, and certainly I appreciate the questions being asked of what is the interference going to be with for individuals getting that, and I think it's a fair question to ask, could we have done this better at one time? I think we should go, and we are doing a deep dive of what could have been different. Technology has changed. As I said, remember when MNLARS was first started, we didn't have iPhones at all. And that time period changed so fast. I'm asking our agencies, I'm asking and being led with the advice of the Blue Ribbon Commission and the stakeholders who are here, let's be very thoughtful about over-the-horizon purchases to make sure we're building robust systems that aren't being constrained so we end up buying something that's outdated tomorrow, because there's good thinkers out there, there's good platforms, and I think what they're talking about is that's the way we problem solved on this. And what you see here is folks really trying to lead, really trying to put things in place, really trying to be data-driven for what's in the best interest of Minnesota taxpayers and consumers.
As more companies out there developing software products that states can use, is Minute going to become more a way of pulling different software packages together instead of homegrown?
Since it is day 3 for our commissioner, I'm going to let him answer that. So there you go.
Well, I think, first of all, I think this has been an amazing partnership, and I'm just imagining that this is the way, you know, it always is as it relates to large, complicated things. I think your question is excellent, but really, in honesty, the application portfolio for the state of Minnesota, it's 2,800 applications large. And within that application portfolio, the vast majority of those are vendor-based solutions. This is something that we always have embraced, that as an internal shared services organization, you have to embrace. And really our fundamental core mission is to support the needs of Minnesotans and the agencies that provide those services. And evaluating that market space to make sure that we provide the best solutions is always going to be number one.
Folks, we have time for one more question. The governor and lieutenant governor will remain after the press conference for a few general off-topic questions.
Mr. King, one way to read this whole thing is that, look, the state tried to do this, they failed. They can't hack it, so we're going to go to the private sector because they can do this. Is that an accurate reading of MNLARS' tombstone?
No, I think that's arbitrarily harsh, honestly. I think there's some good that came out of it. If I could play back the whole thing, you know, I think that there was a time in 2017 in September when people should have said it's not ready and we're not going to release it. And if we had stepped back at that point, the vendor packages were sufficient enough, we could have had a realistic discussion then. Unfortunately, there was no way to go back to the old system, so there was no rollback possibility, which is a big flaw in any design. So therefore, you had to forge forward, and that dove us into this problem that we have today. So I think we've learned a lot of lessons. Sometimes lessons come with some cost, and think of it as a real big education in part. But I think this, going forward, what you should do is think about packages that are available, that are built by people that deal with this subject matter every single day. And when you see them in the market, you see multiple of them, the odds are they're going to be a better choice often than building internally. What you should build internally are things that you have the expertise, where you have some competitive advantage. And for me, thinking about it at the highest level, that was not true for a vehicle licensing system.
Thank you, everybody. We'll take a moment here before general Q&A.
And I would just say, as they're clearing out for me on this, and thank all the folks who are here, and thank Rick and his team, it's that 12:01 a.m. in September of 2017 that I'm really focused on, because that's the cultural change that the governor and these commissioners can bring to making sure that we put a culture in place that does what we call in the Army, it's called, anybody can call a check fire, meaning if there was a situation that was viewed as unsafe anywhere, from the top general and the Joint Chiefs of Staff down to the newly enlisted private, you could call a check fire and everything stopped because of the importance of the belief that you could be heard. We had a situation where things continued to go on for whatever reason. People did not feel comfortable pointing out where there are errors. We are implementing that across now, and so you already know at this point in time, we are constantly going through about 2,800 upgrades to software systems. We do 1 billion plus interactions daily, but each one of these now, especially significant software upgrades, are going through a process where the lieutenant governor, myself, our administration, our commissioners are deeply engaged so that we can call the check fire. Our goal is to make sure this administration is prepared, and trust me, it will happen. On a smaller scale, we've had incidences where we have stopped further rollouts till we looked at more details because we were uncomfortable with where that rollout was at, to ensure that we don't go down this path 2.5 years later with the costs that were added on and change course when we could have. And I think that's a really important piece that we can do. And then, as you heard, it's not quite so complex or quite so simple as private sector versus the public on this. Our goal is first and foremost the best deal for the taxpayers with the best experience they can get. I am not ideologically married for 1 second to where those solutions come from. The best delivery we can do is many, many times a public-private partnership. And you heard Rick say, if we have the expertise and we should deliver it, let's go ahead and deliver it. If not, let's use where somebody else is. So with that, please, any questions?
I just want to make sure I'm clear on the total cost before you take other questions. Is not the total cost the $100 million from the OLA report plus the $13 million from the stopgap bill that you signed, then plus the $73 million?
Depending on what that ends up being. And that's the way we're figuring it. And I said, I think as you see it, this was upgrades on both hardware and the data migration of the legacy systems. But if you're looking at it in entirety, that's the way I would figure it. And for me, again, I think Rick did a nice job of saying this. Would it have been better off? We didn't have that technology. We didn't have iPhones at the time. But I still don't think that's an excuse for not having a little more vision on where this was going, by not having a little more if you will, checkpoints in there where you could do that validation. This Blue Ribbon Commission is helping us to do best practices to build that into the air we breathe across the enterprise so that those checkpoints are there, because there are other big systems. Many of you hear me not facetiously now, truthfully, that at some point in time we have to upgrade every system. One of them is the DNR licensing system for deer licenses. And I said, I told my team, I said, I will not be the governor when deer licenses don't go out on opening day and people don't have them. I am not going to be that guy. And I said, one of the things is that there should be a sense of, you do not want to be associated when things fail, and you should go back and do the things necessary. We have incredibly smart people. We have, and you're going to see it in this report, Minute is incredibly capable, and this Blue Ribbon Commission says they play a key and central role. We just need to clarify what their key and central role and the processes that they should be involved in and where we should interface and bring in those package software solutions. So please, go ahead.
Governor, in the NOR trial, I don't know if you've followed any of the coverage, but the prosecutors allege that the BCA of your own government at best was incompetent in their investigation, at worst showed favoritism to the officer. Have you been briefed and any reflections on the way the prosecution portrayed your BCA?
No, but we have asked for, and we're getting all the evidence and the background on where this came from. First of all, let me say this is a tragic situation, and to the family involved, a loss of a daughter, a sister, horrific. I think it's for us to understand what are the processes that were there. I know this came out in the trial. Our commitment is, and a perfect segue to where we're at on this. We expect those practices to be best practices. We expect them to follow the law and the processes. I need to understand what went happen here and what brought up those accusations, and to understand whether we can validate them, and if we do, what are the processes to move to alleviate that.
So you are looking into this?
So yes, they're providing us all of the background of where it got to that point. I have not yet read it through. I followed it like you have, and you've covered it in the press. We have not got official report from them, but as this came forward and as those accusations started to come up, I have asked for us, as this trial ended, to gather all that information, to look at where that was coming from, to go back and piece together and do the post-mortem, if you will, on the process itself.
Governor, you told us that there were two areas where you would not negotiate. One was HAVA and the other is the healthcare access fee. Guns was not on that short list. We've had now Senator Zelka say gun bills are dead. The House passed gun bill. Are you prepared to, forgive me, counsel the House to stand their ground? Or are you going to tell them, look, this may be an area where you're going to have to give because we got to get this done?
Yeah, well, we're about into that point. They should finish today, so I feel like now, since I've had a budget out for February 19th, I think my friends in the Senate saw how very difficult it is when they put out a human services bill, and it got a little bit hot for them to actually have to tell people what you're going to cut instead of saying, I'm going to save you money and give you the same services. That's not the case, and there was no proof in that. On these issues, and I still have not changed my position, the HAVA piece is ridiculous at this point in time, and it needs to be done. No, my words to them is that I still believe strongly that this is something that we could do. States across this country have done it. There is real research to show that we can show a reduction in gun deaths, particularly suicide deaths, which we know are up. I was in Fergus Falls last night, and the mental health crisis in this state is at an epic proportion. They have had 3 suicides in a community of 14,000 in the last month. So I would encourage them to do that. I've been particularly hesitant to draw those hard lines because I'm continuing, and again, I hope you're starting to cover at this. I am willing to compromise with them. The Senate tells me they are, but their compromise goes, they view compromise as no, 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 4 no's. No, 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 we went to 3 no's, so we've compromised with you. That is not it. So what I would say is I think there are sensible gun legislation. I think there is no reason that we can't have those. I would be very interested when we get into some of these debates to understand what it would help for my friends, especially those who are responsible gun owners, to see what we could do to get something done. Minnesotans are asking for it, but I'm going to be, again, this is a sensitive time over these 19 days. I am open to negotiating for what's best for Minnesota. I will not put their health care at risk, and it has now reached a point where no one can understand why we haven't done HAVA, and that be helpful. My suggestion on this would be is we should just clear that thing up, because this is a good thing today, and for those who've said they get tired of us pointing to MNLARS as a place of agreement on, this is a big lift. This is good stuff. This is smart stuff. And there is an honest relationships being built on what's best for Minnesota taxpayers. And I think guns doesn't have to be this thing that is untouchable. Bring it in.
Governor, the DNR has appealed the ruling on the name of the lake, I've heard it 3 different ways, but go ahead. Your reaction.
Well, I'll start out with this. First of all, I support the DNR's position to appeal this, and I take that position as a history teacher and someone who has spent my time looking at historiography, and that is the history of history. This state's history extends back beyond 1858. There were and there are people of Ojibwe and Dakota descendants that are still here today, and I think it behooves us to tell that story. So.
Would you comment on that?
Sure. I am grateful for the decision that the DNR made to appeal this decision. And I think as we have been having recently some debates about history here at the Capitol, it's important for me, mostly as a mom of a Native little girl, that she see herself truly and accurately reflected in the history that we talk about and that we share here in the state of Minnesota. And as the governor mentioned, history started on the very land that we stand on before 1858. And the Dakota people were here. They are still here, and they will remain here. So my hope, and I know that this has been a difficult and traumatic conversation for a lot of Indigenous people in the state. And my hope is that with this appeal, we can get back to the conversations that I think the governor and I want to have about the future of the state and making sure that we have a budget and legislation that allows everyone to thrive, including Native American people.
Last question.
Can you talk about the wolf hunt? Each of you, are you in favor or opposed of allowing a wolf hunt?
Well, it's personal for me. I am Wolf Clan. There's rules. You can't eat or hunt your own clan. So I think just for me personally, this is an issue where I think that legislation is something that I can support. We also know that we need to make sure that we are doing our best to manage our wolf population so that folks can coexist with wolves. But that's something that I support. I'm not sure where the governor stands on this, but that's my personal perspective.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with the Lieutenant Governor. I think, again, the good wildlife management involves hunting, certainly at certain points. We have a population, and this is one where, as a member of Congress, a selective delisting of the wolf is something that I supported in areas where the population had recovered to the point where it was warranted. The massive and the universal delisting I did not, because it is not supported by good game and game management practices. And I do think, because of the nature of our wolves, that you can have the selective hunts to manage the population. I don't think that's a place where the sport hunting is appropriate. So I do support.
I'm confused though. You're saying you support the legislation the House passed that would not allow for an open wolf season.
That's right.
Okay, that is.
You manage them. You hunt them by game management in a biologically correct manner of management on them.
Well, DNR scientists believe that the hunt that has since been thrown out in court was biologically justified.
We've talked, and I've talked, yeah, and no, and for me, the point of managing our wolf populations correctly, I think what we know is, and we're seeing this in especially the western states, of a full delisting and a full open hunt season on that. I am very hesitant on that, and at this point, we were discussing this morning. We're continuing to talk. I do support at this time that piece of legislation, but this is one where, again, I appreciate the Lieutenant Governor. We are able to multitask, but we are incredibly focused on getting a budget across the line, but we will continue to monitor.
We've got a wrap. Thank you, everybody.
Good. Thanks, folks.